What if I told you that right now, at this very moment, there are things moving in the darkness that we have absolutely no explanation for? Things that defy every law of physics we understand. Things that make grown men question their sanity and their grip on reality itself. What if I told you that the scariest moments of your life might not be fictional, horror movies or, jump scares in a haunted house? What if I told you that sometimes the most terrifying experiences happen in the places where you feel safest? Your own home, in the middle of the night, when you're completely alone? I'm about to share 3 stories with you. 3 true encounters that change the way 3 different people see the world forever. And I'm warning you now. These aren't the kind of stories you listen to right before bed. These are the stories that make you check your locks twice. The stories that make you wonder what's really out there, watching, waiting in the shadows. So before we go any further, I need you to do me a favor, like this video. Comment below with your own paranormal experiences. And most importantly, subscribe to Silent Fear, because what you're about to hear will keep you awake tonight. Now let's begin. Story 1, The Thing on the Roof. My name is James, and I need to tell you something. I need to tell you about a night that changed everything. A night that made me question whether the world is actually the rational, explainable place we all pretend it is. Growing up, I was cursed with teeth that were absolutely catastrophic. We're talking about teeth that made people stare. Teeth that made me self-conscious from the moment I could understand what self-consciousness was. My parents did everything they could. Braces, procedures, expensive treatments, but nothing worked. My teeth were just fundamentally wrong. Everyone else got their wisdom teeth taken out in high school. Some people waited until early college, maybe their first or second year of university, but not me. I was different. I was stubborn, or maybe I was just in denial. Either way, I didn't even sit down for a consultation until after I graduated college. When I finally did it, when I finally went through with the extraction, the pain was unlike anything I'd ever experienced in my entire life. The recovery period was absolutely brutal. The pain medications that the dentist prescribed weren't strong enough. They would wear off long before I was supposed to take the next dose. So I developed this system, this horrible, exhausting system that kept me functioning, but also slowly drove me insane. Every 3 hours, without fail, I would wake myself up. I would drag my body out of bed, stumble to the kitchen, and take another pill. Then I would try to go back to sleep. 3 hours of fractured, interrupted sleep, followed by hours of being awake, over and over and over again, night after night. My body adapted to this rhythm faster than I expected. But adaptation is a dangerous thing. Your body can get used to almost anything, even things that are fundamentally unhealthy and wrong. Even after the physical wounds healed, even after the dentist told me I was recovering normally and could stop taking the pain medication, my mind refused to let go. I would still wake up at 3 a.m, still wake up at 4, still wake up at 5. My brain had been trained to expect pain at those hours. And even though the pain was gone, the habit remained. I'd lie in bed at 2 a.m, completely awake, my mind racing. At 3 a.m, my eyes would snap open as if someone had turned a light on in my skull. At 4 a.m, I'd be staring at the ceiling, begging my body to let me sleep. One night, probably sometime during the first week of recovery, when the pain was still at its absolute worst, I woke up at 4 in the morning. My bedroom was unbearably hot. The air conditioning had stopped working sometime during the night, and the summer heat had turned my room into an oven. Sweat was pooling on my skin. My sheets were soaked. I was desperate, absolutely desperate for some kind of relief, some kind of comfort. I did something I had never done before. I opened my bedroom window. The night air helped, but only slightly. I was still awake, still suffering, still lying there in the darkness, praying that sleep would come and take me away from the pain and the exhaustion and the overwhelming sense that my body was betraying me. And that's when I heard it. A scratching sound, not a gentle scratching. Not the kind of scratching you'd expect from a small animal. This was deliberate. This was methodical. It sounded exactly like claws dragging against something rough and wooden. At first, I thought it was just the ambient noise of the forest. We lived deep in the woods, surrounded by trees on all sides. Raccoons were a constant problem. Possums, squirrels, all kinds of creatures that would wander into our yard looking for food or shelter, so I tried to ignore it. I tried to close my eyes and pretend I was hearing things. But the more I listened, the more my skin crawled. The more I realized that this sound was wrong. It had an intentionality to it. It wasn't random. It wasn't the sound of an animal just casually exploring. It was deliberate, purposeful, almost like something was searching for something. The scratching moved. It was traveling. And I realized with growing dread that it was coming from directly above me, from the roof. I heard it traveling across the shingles, a slow, methodical sound that made every single hair on my body stand straight up. The sound traveled along the roof, moving from one section to another, then gradually fading out as the creature or whatever it was moved to another part of the house. Every rational part of my brain told me to ignore it, to close the window, to lie down and try to sleep. I was injured. I was exhausted. I was in pain. This was not the time to go investigating strange noises in the middle of the night. But I also knew something else. I knew that my father would absolutely lose his mind if something burrowed into our attic again. We'd had that problem before, and it had been expensive and stressful to deal with. So despite being in a fog of pain and exhaustion, despite every fiber of my being screaming at me to stay in bed, I got up. I grabbed my father's heavy-duty flashlight from the garage and headed outside into the darkness. The beam of the flashlight cut through the night as I swept it across the back roof. Nothing. No movement. No sign of any creature. I walked around to the front of the house, where the roof climbed much higher, much steeper, still scanning desperately with the flashlight. And then I saw it. Just for a fraction of a second. Just a tiny shift in the corner of my vision. A shadow that moved when nothing should be moving. Without thinking, acting purely on instinct, I whipped the flashlight toward the spot where I'd seen the movement. My blood turned to ice. Standing on the roof, silhouetted against the night sky, was a person. Not an animal. Not a pack of animals. A fully grown human being. Completely naked. Completely motionless. Staring directly into the beam of my flashlight. I screamed. The sound that came out of my mouth was involuntary. It was pure primal terror. And the moment that sound left my throat, the figure on the roof moved. But it didn't move like a person should move. It moved with an animalistic speed that simply shouldn't have been possible for a human being. Barefoot on loose shingles on uneven, slippery surfaces, It scrambled across the roof faster than I could track with my light. Faster than my eyes could follow. Something deep inside me, something primal and instinctive, kicked in. I wasn't thinking anymore. I wasn't processing what I was seeing or trying to make sense of it. I was just running, sprinting around the back of the house, screaming for my father at the top of my lungs. I made it to the back of the house just in time to see the figure preparing to jump off the roof. The roof at that point was at least 15 feet high, maybe more. No one could survive a jump from that height. No one. 15 feet onto concrete and stone. That would break bones. That would cause serious life-threatening injuries. But this thing didn't hesitate for even a fraction of a second. It launched itself off the roof and slammed into the concrete below with a sound like thunder. A sound that echoed through the entire yard and seemed to rattle the very foundation of the house. I froze, expecting to see a crumpled body, a broken heap of flesh and bone lying motionless on the pavers. Instead, the figure stood up, its legs bent in ways that human legs shouldn't bend. It straightened itself up, and in the beam of my flashlight, I could see it looking directly at me. And then it charged. What happened next is a blur of terror and pain and survival instinct. The figure tackled me to the ground, and I felt something rake across my face. Long, filthy nails, claws. They tore into my skin with a force and a malice that I had never experienced before. I was screaming, I was thrashing, I was fighting with every ounce of strength I had left. But I couldn't get free. The strength of this creature was inhuman. It was impossible. No human being should have that much strength. Blood was pouring down my face. I could feel it running down my cheeks, dripping onto my chest. I could taste it in my mouth. And in that moment, with my face being torn apart and my body being held down by something I couldn't understand, I genuinely believed I was about to die. I thought this was it. This was how my life was going to end. Torn apart in my own backyard by something that had no right to exist. But then the back door burst open. My father was there. I could see him in the darkness, and he looked angrier, more furious, more absolutely enraged than I had ever seen him in my entire life. He pulled this thing off of me with a strength born from desperation and paternal rage. In the chaos, the creature broke free of my father's grasp and took off toward the fence. It jumped, impossibly high, cleared the fence without even slowing down, and disappeared into the darkness of the forest beyond. My father and I stood there, frozen in shock. The only sound was the fading crash of footsteps, disappearing deeper and deeper into the woods until eventually there was nothing but silence and the sound of our own ragged breathing. I spent that night in the hospital. Stitches, antibiotics, multiple vaccinations for diseases I didn't even want to think about. The doctors had to confirm that I hadn't been exposed to anything dangerous or infectious. And here's what really bothered me about the whole experience. Here's what made me realize that something genuinely wrong had happened that night. The doctors, when they examined my wounds, told me something that I will never forget. The wounds didn't match human fingernails. The pattern of the scratches, the depth, the angle, none of it matched what a human hand would do. And more than that, the strength required to inflict wounds like that didn't match human physiology. According to the doctors, no human being should have been strong enough to do what was done to my face that night. The police found nothing. They searched the woods, they questioned the neighbors, they filed a report, and told us to call back if anything else happened. And then they left. Their official conclusion? That someone had broken in through an unlocked door, attacked me, and escaped into the forest. But that didn't make sense. Every door and window in our house was locked that night. I knew it. My father knew it. We had checked multiple times. My father later discovered something that made the whole experience even worse. He found claw marks on the attic vent. Long, deep scratches that looked like something had been trying desperately to dig its way inside. To this day, I don't know what stood on that roof. I don't know where it came from or why it chose our house. I don't know if it was something that had escaped from somewhere, or if it had always been out there in the woods, and that night was just the night that our paths crossed. What I do know is this: the police's explanation was wrong. Something genuinely inexplicable happened that night, and I absolutely know that I am not the only one who's experienced something like this. Story 2, the face at the window. Several years passed after that night. Years of trying to move on, years of convincing myself that maybe there was some rational explanation, some detail I had overlooked or forgotten. But then came the second experience, and this one would happen in broad daylight, in full view of my girlfriend. My parents left town for a week. They were going to visit family out of state, and they left me in charge of the house. My parents are traditional people, very traditional. They have strict rules about overnight guests, particularly overnight guests of the opposite sex. They would have been absolutely furious if they knew what I was about to do. But they weren't home, and what they didn't know wouldn't hurt them, right? I invited my girlfriend, Hannah, to stay over for a few days. My parents had met her dozens of times. They knew her. They liked her. It wasn't like I was bringing some stranger into the house. But I also knew that in their minds, that didn't matter. The rules were the rules, and the rules said absolutely no overnight guests. The first night was relatively uneventful. We ordered pizza, watched a movie, drank some wine, and just relaxed. It was perfect. It was normal. It felt safe. The first morning we went for a swim in the pool. We spent the afternoon playing games, watching television, just enjoying each other's company in the kind of low-key way that made me happy. But the second night is where everything changed. It was just past midnight. Hannah and I were lying in bed together, talking quietly in the dark. We were about to fall asleep. I was feeling peaceful, content, safe. And then I heard it. A scratching sound. No, not scratching. Screeching like metal on metal, like something metallic being dragged across something else metallic. It was coming from outside the house, or from the direction of the driveway. My entire body went rigid, every muscle tensed up. My heart rate, which had been slowing down, preparing for sleep, suddenly spiked. Because I knew that sound. I'd heard that sound before, years ago on that night that I had tried so hard to forget. I told Hannah to stay put. I didn't explain why. I didn't tell her about my past experience. I just told her to lock the bedroom door behind me and not to come out no matter what she heard. I made my way to the front door and turned on the exterior lights, but they barely illuminated the driveway. The light wasn't strong enough. There were too many shadows. I could see the general area, but not clearly. I stepped outside anyway, hoping that my mere presence, the fact that someone was awake and aware, would be enough to scare away whatever animal was out there. I stood on the porch for a few seconds, waiting to hear scampering sounds or see an animal run across the yard, but nothing happened. The sound of the trash can had stopped. The screeching had ended. Everything was silent. I figured that maybe, just maybe, whatever had been out there had already run away. But I'd been watching and listening the whole time, and I hadn't heard or seen anything leave, so that didn't make sense. Reluctantly, I clicked on my phone flashlight and started walking down the front steps toward the driveway. As I got closer, I could see that one of my father's trash cans had indeed been messed with. 2 of them were sitting normally against the garage door, but one of them was completely overturned. Its contents were scattered across the driveway. Garbage everywhere. I groaned. I knew I was going to have to clean all of that up. But at least, it seemed like a normal animal situation, just a raccoon or a possum looking for food. I should mention that even after approaching the trash cans, even after shining my flashlight all around the area, I didn't see anything. No movement, no eyes reflecting in the darkness, no sign of any creature at all. So I concluded that the animal had indeed slunk away, probably scared off by my presence. Without giving it much more thought, I started picking stuff up from the driveway and throwing it back in the trash can. After I finished with that, I went back inside, opened the garage door, and moved the trash cans inside so that nothing would return later and wake us up. Then I locked the garage and went back to bed. Hannah was still awake, but barely. I could tell she was about to fall asleep. I gave her a gentle kiss on the forehead, trying not to disturb her too much, and settled on to my side of the bed. I was in that strange in-between phase of consciousness and unconsciousness. You know the one. The phase where you're half dreaming, but you can pull yourself out of it if you concentrate. Your body feels heavy. Your mind feels like it's floating. It's one of the most peaceful states a human being can experience. And that's when I heard something. A tapping noise. Gentle, deliberate, metal on glass. It sounded like someone was very lightly, very carefully tapping on a window. At first I was convinced it was part of the half dream I was having. Some detail my sleeping brain had conjured up. But something about it was just the slightest bit too unsettling. Something about it felt too real, too intentional. So instead of succumbing to exhaustion and drifting off into sleep, I opened my eyes and looked around the room. Sure enough, the tapping sound didn't stop. I froze. I didn't move a muscle. I just lay there listening, trying to pinpoint exactly where it was coming from or even what it was. After a few seconds of listening intently, I realized that it wasn't coming from inside the room at all, even though it sounded so clear and so close. That could only mean one thing, though. It was coming from just outside my window. From the front of the house, I forced myself out of bed slowly, quietly. I didn't want to alert Hannah, and I didn't want to alert whatever was outside. I stood up slowly and peeked behind the curtain of my bedroom window. In the minimal light from outside, I could see the outline of a person standing at the front door with their back to me. They were facing the door itself, not looking out at the yard, and they were tapping on the glass. Tap, 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 over and over and over again. It was terrifying. I looked for a little while longer, trying to make out more details, trying to see who this person was, but I couldn't see anything distinctive without more light. I couldn't see their face. I couldn't see what they were wearing. I could just see the outline of a person standing at my front door, in the middle of the night, tapping on the glass as if expecting someone to answer. But that was absolutely insane. It was past midnight. None of the house lights were on. There was no indication that anyone was home. No sane person would be doing what this person was doing. As I was standing there watching them, trying to figure out what was happening, I noticed them start to turn around. Without thinking, acting purely on instinct, I ducked down below the window line just in time. I felt my heart start racing. I was crouched behind the window, completely frozen, absolutely terrified that they had seen me, that they knew I was there watching them. I must have stayed crouched behind that window for a full minute. My legs were starting to hurt. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I didn't want to look again. Every part of me was screaming to stay down, to stay hidden, to not draw any attention to myself. But I had to know. I had to see what was happening. The not knowing was worse than the knowing. With a deep breath, I mustered up the courage to take another look. Slowly, carefully, I stood back up. I peeled the curtain back, just enough to see through the window, and instantly, I regretted it. There, just 2 inches from the glass, was a face staring back at me. Not looking at me, staring at me, directly at me, as if it knew exactly where I was, as if it had been waiting for me to look. I yelled. I recoiled from the window, yanking the curtain shut as hard as I could. Even though we were only face to face for a split second, I was able to make out that it was a man. But the skin was wrong. The skin was sagging, sunken, like the face of someone who had been dead for days. Like the face of a corpse that had been left in the sun. The features were melting, collapsing in on themselves. And the eyes, those hollow, empty, lifeless eyes, they had been staring directly at me as I fell back onto the bed, still yelling uncontrollably. Hannah woke up in a panic. I screamed at her that there was someone outside. I made sure my bedroom door was locked before grabbing my phone and calling 911 with shaking hands. The police showed up a little over 10 minutes later. Hannah and I stayed locked in my room the entire time. I really wanted to run to the front door to see where the creep had gone. But Hannah was clutching onto my arm, terrified, and wouldn't let me move. When the police finally arrived, I let them inside and told them everything I had seen. Every detail, every moment. They did a quick sweep of the house. And with my help, we confirmed that there was no sign of forced entry. Every single door and window was still locked. The entire house was secure. That put me at ease. But it still didn't explain why that guy was creeping around my house or where he had gone. Where could he have gone? He was standing right at my front door. Then I looked out the window and he was there. Then he turned around and then he disappeared. How does someone just disappear like that? Eventually, after walking the perimeter of the house with their flashlights, after poking around the yard and checking the bushes, the police told us they didn't find anything unusual. One of them told me to call back should I see that guy again. Then they left. The rest of the week passed without incident. Nothing happened. No sounds, no visitors, no strange occurrences. I ended up telling my parents about the experience, and to my surprise, they didn't seem overly concerned about it. We don't exactly live in a sketchy neighborhood. It's actually a fairly safe, quiet area. So I think they were surprised that I was being so dramatic about it. Their reaction made me feel like I was overreacting a little bit. I mean, what had really happened? Some homeless guy had crept around my house. Maybe he was looking for a warm place to sleep or thinking about stealing something. That made sense, didn't it? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I was making a big deal out of nothing. It was probably just some vagrant, confused, maybe under the influence of something, but if that were the case, if it really was just a normal criminal or homeless person, I probably wouldn't be telling you the story right now. The reason I'm telling you this now is because for the past few nights, I've woken up randomly in the middle of the night to strange noises coming from outside my window. Not my trash cans moving around like what I'd heard before, but different sounds. Unfamiliar sounds. I told my father about them, and he's actually planning on installing some security cameras around the perimeter of the house. He's taking it seriously now. He's worried too, but still, I can't help but feel like that guy showing up at my house wasn't a one-off thing. If anything else happens, I'll be sure to send a follow-up. Story 3. The Intruder with No Exit. What you're about to hear is an experience that nearly made me lose my mind. It's still something that I think about quite often, if I'm being honest. I've been able to recover a bit in the months since it happened, but the questions remain. The mystery is still unsolved. The whole story is pretty quick, so I'll get right into it. I'm a single guy in my mid-30s. I live alone with no pets in a small one-story house. The house is really modest. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a living room, a kitchen, a dining room, and a tiny garage. That's it. Life is fantastic. Because of my profession, I can work on my own time and don't have to answer to anyone. No girlfriend controlling my schedule, no parents telling me what to do, no employer demanding that I be somewhere at a specific time. Freedom has always been an imperative part of my life, so I've done my best to maximize it wherever possible. I know a lot of people are different, and a lot of people might judge me for my quote-unquote immature lifestyle, but everyone has different priorities and preferences. So as long as no one judges me, I won't judge them. The excess freedom is definitely tethered to its own set of drawbacks, though. I've developed some bad habits that I'm sure some people would frown upon. One of them is my sleep schedule, which is absolutely god-awful. For some reason, I'm most productive at late hours of the night. My creativity peaks, my focus sharpens, my energy levels spike. So I often find myself staying up until dawn and sleeping into the afternoon. It's just how my body functions. And until I'm absolutely forced to change it, I don't see a reason to do so. One night, or rather early one morning, I was up really late. I'm talking past 3 a.m. late. I was sitting at my desk, getting some work done on my computer. I was completely in the zone, not even listening to music, not even distracted by anything. Imagine yourself at peak hours of productivity. That's the kind of groove I was in. I was on fire. I was working at my absolute best. The room was completely dead silent except for the sound of my keyboard and my work. I was alone with my thoughts, focused entirely on what I was doing. And then, out of nowhere, the silence was interrupted. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps pounding down the hallway toward my bedroom. Fast. Aggressive. Angry, almost. And then 3 or 4 thunderous bangs on my bedroom door. Like absolutely deafening bangs. The type of bangs you'd expect if the police were trying to barge into a drug den. The type of bangs that sound like someone is trying to break the door down. I shot up from my chair so fast I banged my knee hard on the desk and knocked my monitor over. It crashed onto the floor with a sound of breaking glass. I was just so shocked. It caught me completely off guard. My heart was racing. My adrenaline was spiking. I stood there, completely frozen, staring at the door. Every rational part of my brain was preparing for what I knew was coming. The door bursting open. Someone barging into my room. Me having to fight a complete stranger in pitch black darkness. But it never came. The door didn't burst open. I didn't hear anything else. Not even the sounds of footsteps retreating from the door. It was like I'd imagined the whole thing, but I was 100% positive I hadn't imagined it. I didn't know how long I stood there, but I physically could not force myself to move. It was like sleep paralysis, except I hadn't been dreaming. I was completely awake. My eyes were fixed on the door. My muscles were tense. I was waiting for the next sound, the next indication of what was happening on the other side. And then finally, I heard it. Footsteps. Walking quickly, hurriedly, back down the hallway. So someone had been there. Someone had definitely been there. Something snapped inside me. Maybe it was panic. Maybe it was adrenaline. Maybe it was pure survival instinct. Without thinking, I grabbed an empty beer bottle off my desk, ran to the door, and started chasing after whoever had broken into my home. I didn't even try to be quiet. I screamed at the top of my lungs like a lunatic, hoping that my screaming would give me some kind of psychological advantage. Or maybe I was just hoping to scare them away. Either way, I was chasing through my house, screaming like someone insane. But I never found anyone. My house isn't that big. There aren't many places someone could hide. But even after checking every single room, after looking in every closet, after examining every corner and dark space, there was no one there. All the doors and windows were locked too. Deadbolted, secured. Which was even more confusing because that didn't make any sense. How could someone have gotten into my house if everything was locked? And if everything was locked, how could they have gotten out? My bout of confidence was completely drained after that, and I felt a fear start flooding back in. I sprinted back to my room, locked the door, and called 911 with shaking hands. In the time it took the police to arrive, I listened to my surroundings in complete silence. But I never heard anything else. No more footsteps, no more noises, nothing. When the police finally showed up, we searched the house together. We checked every room. We looked everywhere, but found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no indication that anyone had ever been there. One of the officers tried to convince me that whoever had been there had simply left before they arrived. But I insisted that everything had been locked up. I insisted that I'd checked multiple times. He told me I had probably overlooked something. He told me that in the stress and confusion, I must have missed an unlocked window or door. It took everything in me not to curse him out right there. I know for a fact that nothing had been unlocked. I check my locks obsessively. I'm paranoid about security. But that didn't explain how that person had gotten into and out of my house. Unless I'd imagined it. But I knew I hadn't. I knew what I'd heard. For the next week, I was a psychological mess. My brain refused to accept that I had imagined something so vivid, so real. But I couldn't conceive of a possible way that a person had gotten into and out of my house when everything was locked. I'm much better now, much more stable. But there was a time where I had trouble sleeping, eating, working, doing anything productive. Even now, months later, the only explanation I can think of is that I somehow didn't notice an unlocked window or door in my house. Maybe in the dark, in my exhausted state. I missed something. Still, though, why anyone would crash through my house, bang on my door just to run away, is a complete mystery to me. What was the point? What were they trying to accomplish? These are 3 experiences that have come from real people, from real lives. 3 encounters with something that defies explanation. 3 stories that don't have neat, tidy endings or rational solutions. I don't have all the answers. None of us do. What I have are questions. Haunting questions that may never be answered. What are these things? Where do they come from? What do they want? If you've experienced anything similar, if you've encountered something that defied logic, something that made you question reality itself, something that you can't explain no matter how hard you try, please comment below. Share your story. You're not alone. There are thousands of people out there who have experienced things like this, things that don't fit into our understanding of the world, things that make us question everything we think we know. And if you haven't subscribed to Silent Fear yet, now is the time. Because sometimes the scariest stories aren't fiction. Sometimes they're the ones that actually happen to people just like you. Like this video, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Silent Fear for more terrifying true encounters that will make you question what's really out there in the darkness. Thank you for watching. Stay vigilant. Stay aware, because you never know what might be watching you.